Well, good evening, Forest Mill. If you have been waiting for me, I want to apologize. I'm about five or 5 minutes later, so I somehow or other it signed me out of the Forest Mill account, and I couldn't figure out how to get logged back into the Forest Mill account. So, little technology snafu on my end. I apologize for that. I thought I was all ready to go and on time and everything. But it is good to be with you this Wednesday night in middle of just a beautiful week of weather, and it is kind of for school teachers and school kids, and for me as a bus driver, really on that downhill slope towards the end of the school year. Looking forward to that break that's coming up this summer, and I know that many of our educators have had a really hard year, and the school kids too, for that matter. It's been a difficult year, and so just reaching the end of the school year in and of itself is quite an achievement, and I'm sure that many will welcome that break that's coming up at the end of May. Big news in our community and big news in the state is that they have lifted many of the mask mandates for the county school system, for instance. No longer has a mask mandate for students or any of the previous requirements, really. Though I've noticed that some of my kids are continuing to wear their masks. It's no longer a requirement. And statewide, Governor Lee has lifted the mask mandates in all of the rural counties, and some of and then many of the metro has given them a time frame in which to begin to scale back. I know Metro Nashville has already scaled back their outdoor mandates. They're going to continue to ask people to wear masks indoors, but it just seems like all of this is beginning to sort of wind down, and what a welcome reprieve that will be. I know that after I've talked with many of you over the past weeks and over the past year about how much we have looked forward to this time, and it is again just a really beautiful sight to be sort of drawing near to this coronavirus pandemic. If hopefully that the numbers will stay down and we can continue to do more and more and kind of get back towards normal. Well, tonight in our our psalm, we see a side of David that we see in a few of his stories, but it's kind of a psalm of anger, if anything. There's a little bit of anger in there, and kind of some open hostility. And if you've read the Psalms of David, you know that's not all that unusual. He seems to be writing now not on behalf of himself. In other words, this is not a personal psalm. Oh, and I should note that this psalm is attributed to David. Certainly, we don't know that for certain. He didn't sign his name to it or anything, but very, very early on in the Hebrew text, David's name appears in the title of this psalm, a psalm of ascents of David. And so that's kind of really our best evidence is the early attributions of many of these psalms. And the psalms do have titles. Now we know that chapters and verses didn't appear till much later in the development of the Bibles that we carry around today. But the Psalms have had chapters, or not chapters, but have had titles for many of them for a long time, even well before the New Testament. And we believe that there's evidence that these titles have been around for a long time. And this one includes David's name. So we're just, for the sake of argument, going to attribute this to David as well. But he's not writing just for himself. He's writing on behalf of really the entire nation. And again, it's a psalm of anger, even some open hostility. And It could be that when David, from the occasion when David began his reign in Jerusalem and the Philistines attacked on 2 occasions, and God gave David really great deliverance over that. So there's battle, but there's also thanksgiving in here. And so what we're going to do is just look at the different ways we can get ourselves into trouble, and what God's role is in that. Now, Nehemiah's words are our God will fight for us. And certainly we want to carry that mantra through, and that may even sum up best how to interpret this particular psalm. And we're not facing, we don't have nations aligned against us. They're not out to get me and you. Our nation has enemies, and there are places in the world where Christians face open hostility, places, nations, and regions of countries that are not welcoming to Christianity. But you and I, we're pretty safe as far as that goes. So it might be tempting just to say, well, this doesn't apply to me. I mean, obviously, David's writing about nations being aligned against the people of God, Israel here, and that's not our case. And that's true, but there's still a lot for you and I to learn, because we do still face emergencies that are beyond our abilities, emergencies or conditions that are more than we can handle. And this psalm gives us a really great attitude with which to face those conditions. So let's just begin by reading the first couple of verses here of Psalm 124. Psalm 124. If the Lord had not been on our side, let Israel say, if the Lord had not been on our side when people attacked us. Or people literally rose up against us. Now, the NIV that I'm reading from just sort of goes ahead and does the job of saying rose up against really means to attack. And that's true. But it gives when you hear rise up against, you get maybe more of a picture that this is almost like a sneak ambush. You imagine you're walking down the road, and then out of the bushes rise up some people to attack you and steal your possessions or to beat you senseless, right? To rise up against, it gives the idea of an ambush, and that seems to be the connotation here that there's someone who has come to oppose the people of God. And as Christians today, we know that Satan is our adversary, that he is out to get us. And this is really a good description of the way he often attacks. We're oblivious, we're going about our business, we think things are all good, things are all normal, and then wham, up rises this attack, this ambush. God promised his chosen people that he would stand with them, that he would bless those whom we blessed, that he would curse those who cursed them. If you go back to Genesis 12:3, that's the promise that God made to Abraham. And God has always kept that promise. The invading armies that conquered Israel and Judah, like Assyria, who overtook the northern kingdom of Israel, and Babylon, who conquered the southern kingdom of Judah. It was not because they were stronger than God. It was not because they were greater than God, or their gods were greater than God, but because God's people were great sinners, he allowed great tribulation. And there is never a sense in which God does not stand up for the righteous. That God always aligns himself with those who are faithful to him. So even the sneak attacks, the ambushes, the rising up, the attacks that we face, whether they are by our neighbor or by conditions uh, in a relationship, or even by Satan himself, we can know that God is by our side. Continue reading in verses 3 through 5. If God had not been our side, if the Lord had not been our side, they would have swallowed us alive when their anger flared against us. The flood would have engulfed us. The torrent would have swept over us. The raging waters would have swept us away. Now, this is a word picture of like a deepening, like a flood. And it's a situation maybe you can identify with. It's where things are bad and they just seem to be getting worse and worse and worse. Now, during any rainy season, when the mountain snows would melt, the dry riverbeds in Israel would quickly fill up with water, and these flash floods would threaten people and livestock and really entire houses. And Jeremiah compared the attacking enemy, the invading enemy, like a sudden flood. There's nothing, everything's fine, and then wham, this tide of an enemy rising up. So the image of the persecution of the Israelites is a familiar one, like a rising flood. And so this psalmist fears that this rising tide, this rising flood of persecution would sweep over them. And again, he's writing in the first person plural, us, we, us. And to use that, you get the idea that it's not just a personal problem. This is a national problem that they're facing. And so even then, the promise is that God had been by our side. If the Lord had not been our side, then this rising flood would have swept us away. And maybe you've been in a predicament where it just seems like it's not only is it not getting better, it's continuing to get worse. I've been swimming before in the ocean, and there wasn't a rip tide or anything like that, but the conditions were slowly sort of causing me to drift over and out just a little bit further as I really. And next thing I know, even though it was a really shallow beach and you could touch for a long way out, all of a sudden I'm out over my head. I couldn't touch, and so the first thing I did was to find out exactly how deep it was. I took a deep breath and dropped down to the bottom, and it was way over my head. I don't know exactly. Let's call it 10 feet because I got down there pretty quickly, but well over my head, and continuing to pull me sort of over and out. And I thought, well, this is pretty scary, right? I mean, you can't fight that. All you can do is swim with the current, and so swim that direction and slowly back towards. After a pretty tiring swim, I was able to reach the sandbar once again. But it's a scary feeling when all of a sudden you find yourself over your head. And maybe you've been in a situation like that. Could have been financial or emotional, or with your work, or in a relationship, where things just spiral and seem to get worse and worse. And yet the promise of God to us through all of that is that he will remain by our side. Let's continue reading now in verses 6 through 7, or 6 through 8. I'm sorry, we'll finish up. Praise be to the Lord, who has not let us be torn by their teeth. And there's your third image, like a wild beast. And we get to the fourth one. We have escaped like a bird from the fowler's snare. The snare has been broken, and we have escaped. Our help is in the name of the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. We, as God's people, may have felt trapped. In our culture, in our society, it is easy to do that. You find yourself in a conversation or something like that, and all of a sudden someone springs it. I'm talking with someone about creation versus evolution, and they're kind of going along with me, and then wham, they spring the trap that they have got this ace card that absolutely proves I'm an idiot, or something like that. Or I had a situation on the bus where one of my high school students was trying to trap me and doing something wrong. Well, when those hidden traps rise up, it's a bad feeling. Now, sometimes we can prepare for those, and for me, studying apologetics and why I believe the story of God's creation versus pure random evolution, I'm able to study for something like that. But most often, these traps are not something we've foreseen, not something we have predicted and prepared for. And when those traps spring on us, we have to have a right standing with the Lord. Because he's not only by our side, but he's the one who frees us. Think about the snare of sin, as Paul compares it later in the New Testament, how sin ensnares us and entangles our feet. That's not a snare that we see coming. We, in our ignorance, think maybe we can participate in this sin one time. That'll be a fun thing, and then we'll just go on our merry way. And next thing we know, we are just overwhelmed with our own sin. We maybe form bad habits, and it can lead us into addictions and behaviors and patterns of thought that are unhealthy for us and unhealthy for everyone around us, and we are caught up in a web that we cannot untangle. But that's the great thing about our God. He is the God who has the ability to break the fowler's snare and set us free. Truly and truly, our help is in the name of the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. Well, this Wednesday night, I hope that this time of study finds you well, and that this has been a blessing to you. So we're going to ask God's blessing on both you and the study of his word this evening. God bless.